Long before it became an empire, before its legions marched across Europe and Africa, before emperors and marble statues, there was only a small village beside a river, a simple place, a few huts, a few dreams. This was Rome. The river Tiber ran, smooth and gentle, catching sunlight as it drifted west toward the sea. Along its banks, shepherds watched over flocks. The hills, 7 in number, framed the settlement in gentle curves, protecting it like open arms. The Palatine, the Aventine, the Capitoline. They would one day hold temples, palaces, and stories. But not yet. In those earliest days, the people were farmers. They rose with the sun and rested with the stars. They plowed and planted. They built, with hands hardened by labor and hope. The air was filled with smoke from clay hearths, with the smell of bread and wood and wool. Life was hard, but it was theirs. And out of myth, a story took root. Of 2 brothers, abandoned in the wild, Romulus and Remus, fed by a she-wolf, raised by a shepherd. Brothers bound by blood, destined to found a city. But they quarreled, and in that quarrel, one brother fell. Romulus, victorious, gave the city his name. A legend, yes, but one the Romans carried with pride. They were born of struggle, of survival, of sacrifice. As the centuries passed, their village grew into a town. Stone replaced wood. Walls were built, alliances were formed, but more than anything they developed an identity. They were not ruled by kings, not anymore. After casting off their last monarch, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, the Romans vowed never again to serve a king. In his place, they built a new idea, the Republic. In this republic, power belonged, in theory, to the people. Not to one man, not to a crown. They elected consuls, 2 at a time, to rule together and keep each other in check. They formed the Senate, a council of elders to debate and deliberate. They developed systems of law, of order, of shared responsibility. It wasn't perfect, far from it. The patricians, wealthy landowners, held most of the power. The plebeians, the common people, struggled for voice. But it was a start, and it was theirs. Roman virtue had a name, mos maiorum, the custom of the ancestors. Respect the past, honor the old ways. Keep the fire of tradition burning. And so, as the Republic took shape, Rome became more than a place. It became a belief, a rhythm, a promise passed from father to son, from one generation to the next. They did not know they were building an empire. They only knew they were building something worth protecting. And in the quiet of the Roman night, with oil lamps flickering in clay homes, the people of early Rome closed their eyes, not knowing the world they would one day shape. As dawn broke over the hills of Rome, a new hunger stirred within the young republic, not of food, but of place, of presence, of permanence. Rome had survived its birth, cast off kings, and built a republic with laws and order. But it was surrounded. The Italian peninsula was not empty. Far from it. Tribes, towns, and ancient peoples dotted the land. The Etruscans in the north, refined and mysterious, masters of engineering and ritual. The Samnites in the central mountains, fierce warriors who knew the land better than any map. To the south, Greek colonies, vibrant, rich in thought and architecture, echoing the brilliance of Athens. To exist in this world, Rome would have to fight. And it did. But Rome's genius was never just in its sword. It was in its memory. The Latin Wars came first. Small cities around Rome banded together, tired of Roman ambition. They fought to remain free. But Rome endured, and when it won, it did not destroy. It offered a choice: fight and be crushed, or join and become something more. Many chose Rome. Rome built roads, not just for trade, but for speed. Via Appia, straight and strong, cut through the land like a promise. Armies marched swiftly, messages traveled fast, and Rome's grip grew tighter. Then came the Samnite Wars. Long, bitter, fought over hills and valleys where terrain mattered more than tactics. The Samnites won early battles. They humiliated Roman legions at the Caudine Forks, forcing them to surrender without a fight. Rome remembered, and Rome returned. Years passed. Decades. With every defeat, Rome learned. Its generals improved. Its legions adapted. By the end of the wars, the Samnites had vanished from history. Rome had absorbed them, not just their land, but their strength. Yet Rome was not cruel by nature. Its expansion came with a model, one historians would later call Romanization. It granted partial citizenship to some, full rights to others. It left local customs intact but layered them with Roman law and language. In time, those conquered began to think of themselves not as defeated, but as Roman. Then came Pyrrhus, of Epirus, a Greek king with ambition and elephants, strange beasts on Italian soil. He came to defend the Greek cities in the south. His army was powerful, his tactics sharp. He won battle after battle. But each victory came at great cost, so much so that even Pyrrhus himself, after one blood-soaked triumph, is said to have whispered, "Another such victory, and I am undone." His was the original Pyrrhic victory, a win not worth the price. Eventually he left, and Rome, patient as ever, took the south. By 265 BCE, Rome controlled the entire Italian peninsula, from the Alps to the seas. But conquest had changed the Republic. The army had grown. Generals gained fame. The Senate began to debate expansion, wealth, tribute, and across the sea a new shadow waited. Carthage, older than Rome, richer than Rome, a naval giant, a merchant empire. The two had not yet met in war, but they would. And when they did, the earth would shake. But for now, Rome stood tall, a republic made of farmers, warriors, thinkers, and dreamers, stitched together not by blood but by roads, laws, and a belief that they were building something greater than themselves. And so the people of Rome slept beneath tiled roofs and watched the smoke of evening fires curl into the sky, not knowing that the greatest wars of their age were yet to come. Across the shimmering waters of the Mediterranean, to the southwest of Rome, sat the city of Carthage, ancient, powerful, and proud. Founded by Phoenician traders centuries before, Carthage had grown into a naval superpower. Its harbors were vast, its ships sleek and fast. Its walls were tall and shining, and its markets bustled with goods from every corner of the known world: gold from Africa, glass from Egypt, olives from Iberia, and silver from mines deep in the earth. Rome and Carthage had lived side by side in peace, for a time, but peace is rarely eternal. In 264 BCE, a dispute arose over Sicily. A large, fertile island caught between the two powers. A local conflict, petty and distant, soon spiraled. Rome sent troops. Carthage responded. Neither side expected a full war, yet that is what they got: the First Punic War. Rome had never fought a naval war. Carthage had ruled the sea for centuries. But Rome, in its usual fashion, adapted. It built ships modeled after captured Carthaginian vessels. And it added something new: the corvus, a boarding bridge, turning sea battles into land skirmishes, where Roman discipline could shine. The war lasted over 2 decades. Battles were won, then lost. Fleets were destroyed and rebuilt. Thousands perished. At last, in 241 BCE, Carthage surrendered Sicily. Rome had won, but the cost was enormous, in blood, treasure, and bitterness. Peace did not last long, a generation. Later came the Second Punic War, and with it a name that would haunt Rome for years to come: Hannibal Barca. A brilliant commander, a strategist without equal. Sworn to hate Rome from a young age, he began his campaign not by defending Carthage, but by surprising the world. He led an army, including war elephants from Spain, through the treacherous Alps and into Italy. No one believed it could be done. Mountains, snow, bandits, all stood in his path. Yet he arrived, and what followed was terror. At Trebia, he lured Roman forces into an icy river and crushed them. At Lake Trasimene, he ambushed them in the morning fog. Thousands died before they even knew they were under attack. And at Cannae, in 216 BCE, Hannibal surrounded and annihilated a Roman army of 80,000 men, one of the most devastating defeats in history. The Roman people despaired. Their armies were broken. Their allies began to waver, but Rome did not fall. Instead, it endured. It refused to face Hannibal in open battle again. It adopted a slow, cautious strategy under Fabius Maximus, who earned the nickname the Delayer. No more direct fights, only disruption, harassment, starvation. Years passed. Hannibal remained in Italy but could not breach Rome's walls. His brilliance was trapped. He needed reinforcements. Carthage hesitated. Then came Rome's counterattack, led by Scipio Africanus, a young and bold general. He took the war to Carthage's doorstep. Hannibal was recalled to defend his home. In 202 BCE, at the Battle of Zama, Scipio met Hannibal face to face. This time, it was the Romans who adapted. They learned to counter elephants. They broke the Carthaginian lines. Hannibal was defeated. Rome spared Carthage, but imposed brutal terms. Huge payments, no navy, no wars without Rome's permission. But Carthage recovered. Slowly, quietly, Rome grew suspicious, and fear, when mixed with power, is dangerous. In 149 BCE, Rome declared the Third Punic War. It was not a war of necessity. It was a war of extermination. The Romans surrounded Carthage, besieged it. For 3 years the city resisted, starving but proud. Then, finally, in 146 BCE, the walls fell. The Romans went street by street, house by house. They slaughtered or enslaved nearly every citizen. They destroyed every building. Legend says they sowed the earth with salt to curse the land forever. Whether that part is true or not, one thing is certain. Carthage was gone. Rome now stood as the unquestioned master of the Western Mediterranean. But something had changed. The wars had made generals powerful and ambitious, armies loyal not to Rome, but to the men who paid them. Wealth flooded the Republic, and with it came greed, corruption, and inequality. The Punic Wars had made Rome great, but they had also planted the seeds of its decline. And as veterans returned home to find their farms sold and their voices ignored, a quiet storm began to gather. But for now, in the soft light of Roman villas and the echo of victory songs, the people celebrated. The Eternal City had crushed its greatest rival. No one could yet see that Rome's greatest enemy might one day be itself. The fires of Carthage had barely cooled when Rome turned its gaze elsewhere. To the north, Gaul; to the east, Macedonia, Greece, and beyond. To the south, the sands of Africa. The Republic, flush with victory, had awakened to a new idea. It could be more than just a city with allies. It could become a world power, and so Rome expanded, not suddenly, but steadily. One campaign after another, each led by ambitious generals seeking glory, spoils, or something more elusive, a place in history. Greece falls to the eagle. The ancient world had long looked to Greece, the land of philosophers, orators, and kings. But by the 2nd century BCE, the Greek city-states were shadows of their former selves, fractured, proud, and often at odds. Rome, invited into a conflict between Macedonian kings, entered with a promise of peace. But Rome rarely left where it entered. By the end of the Macedonian Wars, Greece was subdued. Corinth, once a jewel of Hellenic culture, was destroyed in 146 BCE, the same year Carthage fell, a symbol, a message. The Roman legions marched beneath marble statues and olive groves through cities that once birthed democracy and drama, and claimed them all. Greek art, thought, and architecture flowed into Roman homes. Wealthy patricians taught their children Greek. The conqueror was, in many ways, conquered by the culture it absorbed. Conquest becomes routine. Rome's momentum became habit. Conquest was no longer just a response to threat. It became a system. In Spain, fierce tribes resisted Roman order for generations. In Asia Minor, kings left their kingdoms to Rome in their wills, gifts of loyalty or desperation. In North Africa, new provinces were carved from the ruins of Carthage. Each new territory brought soldiers, tax collectors, and settlers, but also resistance. Rebellions flickered in the distance like dry leaves in the wind, quickly crushed, but never entirely gone. The price of growth, with every new province came wealth. Ships filled Roman harbors with grain, gold, ivory, slaves, exotic animals for gladiatorial games, silks, spices. The elite grew richer than ever before. The Senate swelled with men who had governed provinces, exploited them, and returned home, with fortunes. But while the rich dined in mosaic-covered atriums, the common citizens struggled. Small farmers, once the backbone of the Republic, could not compete with the rise of massive estates, latifundia, worked by slaves. Many lost their land. Some moved to the cities. Others joined the army, hoping for pay and a future. Rome had become powerful, yes, but also unbalanced. Voices of change amid the luxury and corruption, some tried to push back. The Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, sought reforms. They proposed land redistribution, cheaper grain, and more power for the common people. The Senate saw them as threats. Tiberius was murdered. Gaius followed 10 years later. The Republic had once prided itself on debate, on oratory, on law. But now, violence had entered the forum. Blood spilled in the streets of Rome, not by invaders, but by Romans. A dangerous precedent had been set. Power could be defended not just by words, but by force. Rome transforms. Physically, Rome grew, magnificent. Temples rose, forums expanded, aqueducts brought fresh water from miles away. Public baths, libraries, and theaters became part of daily life. But beneath the marble, there was tension. Generals grew more powerful than senators. Their legions were loyal to them, not the Republic. Soldiers expected rewards, land, gold, recognition, and generals learned that with the sword they could win more than just battles. They could win the hearts of the masses. In the East, Mithridates of Pontus challenged Rome's growing presence. He would soon spark wars that tested the might of Roman armies. But even greater storms were forming at home. A republic at a crossroads. By the late 2nd century BCE, Rome stood at a crossroads. It was rich, victorious, feared. But it was no longer the small republic of citizen soldiers and modest leaders. It was something else, something heavier, more fragile. Many still believed in the old ways, in tradition, in the Senate, in the rule of law. But others whispered of stronger hands, of singular rule, of one man to bring order. The balance had shifted, and when it tilted, it would not be gently. That night, as Roman villas flickered with the glow of oil lamps and city streets fell silent under a blanket of stars, The people of Rome could not yet see the end, only the triumphs. They did not know that the very tools which had built their world, ambition, conquest, glory, would soon be turned inward. And so the Republic continued, larger, prouder, and unknowingly more fragile than ever before. The Roman Republic, once a modest city-state of citizen farmers, had grown into a vast, complex machine, too large, too rich, and too divided to function as it once had. The Senate still met. Consuls were still elected. Laws were still passed. But behind the marble walls and ceremonial rituals, the Republic was cracking. It was no longer ideas that moved Rome. It was men, powerful men. Men who led armies, commanded loyalty, and bent the state to their ambition. Among them, one name rose above the rest: Gaius Julius Caesar. A man of the people born in 100 BCE to a patrician family, Caesar had noble blood, but little wealth. He was charming, eloquent, and relentlessly ambitious. Early in his life, he was captured by pirates. When they demanded ransom, Caesar laughed and promised he'd return to crucify them all. He did. That boldness would define him. He rose quickly, through speeches, alliances, and generosity that bordered on reckless. He borrowed heavily to fund public games, banquets, and favors. The people loved him for it. In politics, Caesar joined forces with Pompey the Great, a celebrated general, and Crassus, the richest man in Rome. Together, they formed an unofficial alliance, the first triumvirate, to dominate Roman politics. But such unions were always temporary. Gaul and Glorian, 58 BCE, Caesar left Rome to govern Gaul, modern-day France, and Belgium. But he had no intention of simply governing. Over the next 8 years, he waged a brutal and brilliant campaign of conquest. Tribes fell, fortresses burned, entire populations were displaced. By his own account, over 1 million people died. He wrote detailed reports, Commentari de Bello Gallico, presenting himself as methodical, merciful, and destined. Back in Rome, these writings were read aloud like bestsellers. He became a hero to the people, and a threat to the Senate. Crossing the Rubicon. When 50 BCE, Caesar's term in Gaul had ended. The Senate, now aligned with Pompey, ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. He paused. He knew that obedience meant humiliation, or worse. So, on a cold January day in 49 BCE, Caesar crossed the small river that marked the edge of Italy, the Rubicon. As his army stepped across the water, he spoke, "Alea iacta yeast." The die is cast. It was civil war. Pompey fled. Caesar pursued. Battles unfolded across Greece, North Africa, and Spain. In 48 BCE, at the Battle of Pharsalus, Caesar defeated Pompey decisively. Pompey escaped to Egypt, but was murdered before Caesar arrived. There, in Alexandria, Caesar met Cleopatra. Intelligent, ambitious, charismatic. He supported her claim to Egypt's throne. Their alliance would soon become more personal. Dictator. For life returning to Rome, Caesar was hailed as a savior. Parades, statues, honors. He was named dictator, then dictator for 10 years, then dictator for life. But beneath the celebrations, fear simmered. Caesar reformed laws, settled veterans, and expanded citizenship. He was efficient, visionary. But he ignored the Senate, and his power had no limits. To some, he was becoming a king in everything but name. And the Romans, raised on centuries of hatred for monarchy, could not accept that. The Ides. Of March on March 15th, 44 BCE, the Ides of March, Caesar entered the Senate as usual. He was met not with praise, but with knives. Brutus, Cassius, and more than 60 senators surrounded him. They stabbed him 23 times. The last thing he is said to have seen was the face of Brutus, his friend, his ally. Et tu, Brute. You too, Brutus, and with that Caesar fell. He died not in battle, but in the heart of the republic he claimed, to serve. The republic dies slowly, but Caesar's death did not save the republic. It shattered it. Rome was plunged into more chaos, more civil wars, more blood. Mark Antony and Octavian, Caesar's heir, would clash for power. New alliances would rise and fall. Battles would rage across the empire. And in time, one man would emerge as Rome's first emperor. But that is a story for another night. On this night, Rome mourned and trembled. The Senate sat in stunned silence. The Forum echoed with rumor. The people, confused and uncertain, lit lamps in the dusk and locked their doors. And somewhere, in a quiet Roman courtyard, a boy looked to the stars and wondered what Rome would become now. The body of Julius Caesar had barely cooled when Rome was thrown into another storm. His assassination, meant to save the Republic, had done the opposite. The Senate, leaderless and divided. The people, angry and restless. The streets, filled with whispers, torches, and knives. And into that chaos stepped a young man, barely 20, with a calm voice and a famous name. His name was Gaius Octavius. He was Caesar's adopted son and named heir, a fact few took seriously at first. He was quiet, thin, unimposing, but behind his gentle expression lay something Rome had learned to fear: calculated ambition. A fragile alliance, Octavian knew he needed time and power. So he made alliances. He joined with Mark Antony, Caesar's former general and trusted friend, and with Lepidus, another military commander. Together they formed the Second Triumvirate and swore vengeance for Caesar's murder, and they delivered it, ruthlessly. The assassins, Brutus and Cassius, raised armies in the east. In 42 BCE, at the Battle of Philippi, the triumvirate crushed them. The Republic, once fragile, was now only a word. The last civil war, but Rome was not big enough for 3 rulers. Lepidus was pushed aside. That left Antony and Octavian, 2 men, once allies, now rivals. Antony had gone east. He ruled from Egypt alongside Cleopatra, the queen who had once charmed Caesar. Their love story became legend and scandal. To many in Rome, Antony was becoming too Egyptian, too foreign, too royal. Octavian seized the moment. He painted Antony and Cleopatra as threats to Roman values. He rallied the Senate, the army, and the people. In 31 BCE, their forces clashed at the Battle of Actium, a great naval conflict on the Ionian Sea. Octavian emerged victorious. 1 year. Later, Antony and Cleopatra, defeated and cornered, took their own lives. The age of civil war was over. A new kind of rule. Octavian returned to Rome in triumph, not as a conqueror, but as a restorer. He was careful. He spoke of peace, of rebuilding, of stability. He avoided the word king. He respected the Senate, at least in appearance. In 27 BCE, the Senate granted him a new title, Augustus, meaning the revered one, and with that name, something shifted. The Republic, still alive in ritual and name, was gone in truth. The Pax Romana. Under Augustus, Rome entered a time of peace and prosperity unlike any before. Historians would later call it the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. For over 40 years, Augustus ruled with care, patience, and brilliance. He reformed the tax system, built roads and bridges, encouraged trade, strengthened the army, secured the frontiers. He commissioned temples, statues, forums, a city of marble rising from what had once been brick, but most of all, he offered stability, a rare and precious thing after nearly a century of chaos. He refused to be worshipped as a god in Rome, but allowed it quietly in the provinces. He balanced power like a master sculptor balances weight and form. The Senate still met, consuls were still elected, but everyone knew where the real power lived, not in the forum, not in the laws, but in Augustus. The imperial machine. Augustus never wore a crown. He never sat on a throne, but his rule created something new, the imperial system. He laid the foundation for emperors to come, some wise, some cruel, but all absolute. He left no doubt that Rome had changed, not by decree, but by design. When he died in 14 CE, the city mourned as it had never mourned before. He was buried in a grand mausoleum, his legacy carved in stone, not just as a man, but as the founder of an empire. Rome sleeps beneath a new sky that night. Under a soft Roman sky, oil lamps flickered behind curtains of silk. The streets were quiet. The Forum still stood. The Senate still spoke. But the Republic, that old idea of shared rule and balanced power, had vanished like smoke. In its place stood an empire, vast, rich, and wrapped in order. And on the Palatine Hill, where once stood the humble homes of Rome's founders, there now rose marble palaces. The city had become eternal. But empires, like men, rise and fall. And though Augustus had brought peace, he had also set in motion a new question, one that would haunt every generation after him. Who would rule Rome next? Rome, now an empire, stood vast and glittering beneath the Mediterranean sun. From the misty shores of Britannia to the sunburnt deserts of Syria, from the dark forests of Germania to the sands of Africa, it stretched farther than any Roman of the Republic could have imagined. The empire had order, roads, laws, language, legions. But it also had something new, something fragile. It had emperors, and emperors, unlike laws or buildings, could not be trusted to last. After Augustus, when Augustus died in 14 CE, he left behind no sons, only a carefully selected successor, Tiberius, his stepson. Tiberius was capable, but grim. He ruled with caution, paranoia, and eventually withdrew from Rome altogether, leaving the capital to his advisors and spies. His reign was efficient, but joyless, like a shadow stretched across the empire. Then came Caligula, young, popular, and descended from Julius Caesar himself. At first he was adored, but power twisted him. He claimed to be a god, appointed his horse as a priest, ordered random executions. Some say he declared war on the sea itself and ordered soldiers to collect seashells as trophies. His reign was short. He was assassinated by his own guards. After him came Claudius, awkward, stuttering, and underestimated. But he surprised Rome. Claudius expanded the empire into Britain, reformed the legal system, and governed wisely, though surrounded by palace intrigue. He was eventually poisoned, likely by his wife, to make way for her son. That son was Nero. Nero, and the edge of madness Nero became emperor at 16. For a time he was guided by wise tutors, like the philosopher Seneca. But power, as always, revealed true character. Nero was obsessed with music, theater, and his own image. He fancied himself a great artist, often forcing senators to attend his endless performances. In 64 CE, a fire consumed much of Rome. Rumors spread that Nero watched the flames, singing as the city burned. To deflect blame, he targeted a small religious sect growing quietly in Rome, the Christians. He tortured, crucified, and burned them alive. his. Cruelty, extravagance, and paranoia grew. He had his own mother killed. Eventually, the Senate declared him an enemy of the state. Facing capture, Nero took his own life, reportedly whispering, "What an artist dies in me." A year of chaos after Nero's death, Rome fell into uncertainty. In 69 CE, 4 emperors rose and fell in a single year, a time of civil war and shifting loyalties. Finally, a general named Vespasian emerged victorious. He was tough, practical, and rebuilt what Nero had broken. He began construction on the Colosseum, funded not by gold, but by taxes from conquered lands. He founded the Flavian dynasty, passing power to his sons. The 5 good emperors then came a rare era of wisdom. From 96 to 180 CE, Rome was led by what later historians would call the 5 good emperors, a time of peace, prosperity, and progress. Nerva, an elder statesman who stabilized the empire. Trajan, a soldier emperor who expanded Rome to its greatest territorial height. Hadrian, who traveled the empire, building walls, roads, and the iconic Pantheon. Antoninus Pius, a gentle ruler who governed without war. And finally, Marcus Aurelius, philosopher, writer, and warrior. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher. Emperor. Marcus Aurelius was not just a ruler, he was a thinker. Amid campaigns and hardship, he wrote a personal journal, now known as Meditations, filled with reflections on duty, fate, and mortality. He ruled justly with wisdom and restraint, but even he, great as he was, made one tragic mistake. He left power not to a chosen successor, but to his son. His son's name was Commodus. The return of decay, Commodus fancied himself a gladiator. He fought in the arena, demanded divine honors, and ruled like a spoiled child with a crown. He renamed Rome after himself, had statues built in his image as Hercules, declared every month of the year in his own name. Eventually, like so many before he was murdered by those closest to him, and so the cycle resumed. Greatness followed by madness. Order followed by chaos. Each emperor brought a new version of Rome, some building, others burning. Rome, beneath the crescent moon. By the end of the 2nd century CE, the empire had seen it all: glory, shame, triumph, disaster. But it still stood. The roads still bustled. The markets still sang. The aqueducts still flowed. But beneath the stone and splendor, a slow erosion had begun. The empire had grown so vast, so complex that no one man, no matter how wise, could truly hold it together. And as the crescent moon rose over the 7 hills, Rome slept uneasily. For while emperors ruled by day, by night, the cracks widened, and distant thunder rolled across forgotten frontiers. At its height, the Roman Empire stretched farther than any Roman could fully grasp. From the stormy isles of Britannia to the heat-swept sands of Syria, from the green hills of Gaul to the mountain peaks of Dacia, it was a world of cities, peoples, and borders, all bound together by stone roads, Latin language, and imperial law. But even the strongest walls begin to crack, not always from within, but from the edges, and as the 3rd century dawned, the empire's edges were beginning to move. An empire too large. With each new conquest, Rome had expanded not only its lands but its responsibilities. The frontier was no longer a line. It was a web. A fragile outline of fortresses, watchtowers, and river patrols. The Rhine and Danube rivers marked the northern boundary, separating Roman order from the wild, untamed lands of the Germanic tribes, the Goths, the Franks, the Alemanni. To the east, the border met the powerful Parthian Empire, and later the rising Sassanid Persians, strong, organized, and hungry for influence. The legions, once stationed deep within Roman lands, were now scattered thinly along the edges. Alert, tired, and often underpaid, the empire had grown too vast to be managed by one mind. Even emperors with all their power could no longer see the whole. Crisis upon crisis in 235 CE, Emperor Alexander Severus was murdered by his own troops. His death unleashed a storm, a period historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. Over the next 50 years, more than 25 emperors would rise and fall, most through violence, not succession. Some ruled for years, others for mere days. Generals proclaimed themselves emperors. Armies swore loyalty not to Rome, but to their commanders. Civil wars broke out. Frontiers were breached. Invasions came from every direction. The Goths swept through the Balkans. The Persians captured entire provinces in the east. The Franks crossed into Gaul and Hispania. Plague returned, weakening cities and armies alike. Trade routes collapsed. Cities were abandoned. Provinces seceded. For a time, Gaul even formed its own breakaway empire. It seemed that Rome, eternal, proud Rome, might dissolve entirely. Holding the line, and yet. Rome endured. In moments of greatest danger, strong hands sometimes found the wheel. One such hand belonged to Aurelian, a soldier emperor who rose through merit, not birth. He fought enemies on every front. He reclaimed lost provinces. He built massive walls around the city of Rome, many still standing today. Another hand was Diocletian, who realized that no single ruler could govern such an empire. So he divided it. In 285 CE, Diocletian split the empire into 2 parts, east and west, each ruled by an Augustus and each assisted by a Caesar, in what became known as the Tetrarchy. It was a radical shift, but a necessary one. The East, with its wealth, and cities like Antioch and Alexandria began to emerge as the stronger half. The West, with its exposed frontiers and restless tribes, grew more fragile. The cost of survival to defend the empire, taxes increased. Peasants were tied to the land. Freedom shrank. Emperors grew more like generals than rulers. Cities became garrisons. The Senate, once the soul of Roman politics, was now ceremonial, echoing tradition but wielding little power. And across the empire, people changed. Many abandoned the old Roman gods. Temples fell quiet. In their place, a new faith was rising. One born in Judea, once persecuted, now spreading quickly, Christianity. In time, it would become the official faith of the empire, but not without struggle, nor without fire. Twilight at the borders, as the sun set beyond the Rhine, Roman soldiers stood watch in wooden towers, staring into forests that never seemed to end. They did not know the names of the tribes gathering in the dark. They did not know that within a century those tribes would do what Carthage and Persia never could, but they could feel something shifting. The wind carried foreign tongues. The earth trembled beneath strange footsteps. The empire was still vast, still proud, but its edges were thinning. And at night, as campfires flickered along distant frontiers, the silence was no longer peaceful. It was a warning. The sun still rose over Rome, golden and brilliant, but it did not rise over the same empire it once had. The great machine, once oiled by conquest and pride, now ran on memory and habit. The western half of the Roman Empire, once the heart, ode of civilization, was breaking. Not with a single collapse, but with a long, slow sigh. East and West, divided by the late 4th century, the East and West were more than just administrative halves. They were different worlds. The East, with its capital in Constantinople, remained strong, wealthy, Greek-speaking, fortified. The West, with its capital shifting between Milan, Ravenna, and sometimes even Rome, struggled. It faced invasions, debt, and disunity. Its armies were thinner, its cities crumbling, and from beyond the frontier, a storm was coming. The barbarian surge. The Roman word for foreigner was barbarus, barbarian, but these were not mindless savages. They were nations of displaced people, warriors, families, elders, pushed westward by another rising force, the Huns, horsemen from the steppes, fierce and fast. As the Huns advanced, Germanic tribes fled into Roman territory: Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Vandals, Alans. At first, Rome tried to accommodate them. It allowed the Visigoths to settle within imperial borders in exchange for military service, but the empire was too weak to control what it had invited. In 378 CE, at the Battle of Adrianople, Roman forces confronted the Visigoths and were utterly crushed. Even the emperor Valens was killed. It was a disaster the empire never fully recovered from. Rome is sacked in 410 CE. The unthinkable happened. Alaric, king of the Visigoths, marched on Rome itself. The Eternal City, untouched by foreign hands for 800 years, fell. For 3 days the Goths roamed the streets. They looted, yes, but they spared much. They were not monsters. They were desperate. Still, to the Roman world, the event was like a dream turned nightmare. A symbol had been shattered. If Rome could fall, anything could. The shock echoed across the empire like thunder in a hollow temple. The Vandals crossed the sea. In 429 CE, another tribe, the Vandals, crossed from Spain into North Africa. They conquered Carthage, Rome's old enemy, and established their own kingdom. From there, they built a navy and harassed Roman trade. In 455 CE, they sailed across the Mediterranean and attacked Rome once more. This time, the sacking was more brutal. Temples were stripped, palaces gutted, treasures taken. Rome, once the undisputed master of the seas, now watched helplessly as its past was stolen by waves and sails. The last emperor, by the mid-5th century, the Western Empire was emperor in name. Only, real power belonged to generals, to barbarian kings, to regional warlords. Italy itself was now filled with foreign soldiers. Many, once enemies, now paid to protect what remained. In 476 CE, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, perhaps 14 years old, was placed on the throne. His name echoed greatness. Romulus, Rome's founder, and Augustus, its first emperor, but he would be the last. Later that year, a Germanic general named Odoacer deposed him. There was no grand battle, no public execution, no speech, just resignation and silence. The Western Roman Empire had fallen. There would be no more emperors in Rome, no more Senate with power, no more legions defending the Rhine, only memories. The aftermath. Yet, life did not end. People still lit lamps at dusk. Farmers still tended fields. Churches rang bells. Merchants sold bread. The Eastern Empire, now known as the Byzantine Empire, would survive for nearly another 1,000 years, carrying the Roman legacy through new challenges. And the world Rome shaped. Its roads, its language, its laws, lived on in monasteries, in ruins, in stories whispered by candlelight. The empire that became a memory, Rome, did not die in a day. It faded, gently, stubbornly, like embers in a great fire. Its temples cracked, its statues crumbled, its words changed. But in every city built with arches, every legal code rooted in justice, every Romance language spoken, Rome remained. And as the stars shone quietly above the ruins, and ivy curled around broken columns, one truth endured: empires fall, but ideas do not. Let us return now, not to a battlefield or a senate or a palace, but to the silence left behind. Rome has fallen. The emperors are gone, the legions disbanded, the forum overgrown. But the story does not end with collapse. It lingers, decay, stone in memory, in the soft turning of pages. Rome's shadow walk the streets of Paris, and you will see Roman roads beneath your feet. Travel to London, and the old city walls, Londinium, still stand. In Istanbul, once Constantinople, the domes and mosaics whisper of Rome's other life. Even in Washington, or Berlin, or Buenos Aires, the columns, arches, and domes are born of Roman dreams. Rome never vanished. It became a shadow cast across centuries. Laws, letters, and language. The laws of Rome, carefully written, debated, copied, became the foundation of many modern systems of justice. The concept of a senate, of checks and balances, of a republic with shared power echoes in governments around the world. The Latin language once spoken in the streets of Rome evolved into French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian. And Latin still lives in medicine, science, philosophy, and the quiet rituals of the Catholic Church. The Roman alphabet, these very letters, became the most used writing system in the world. Even as the empire decayed, its words did not. Faith and empire. The Christian faith, once persecuted in secret catacombs beneath Roman streets, rose to dominate the empire, and then the world. From Constantine's conversion to the councils that defined Christian doctrine, Rome helped shape the future of faith. Its bishops, its churches, its rituals became central to European and global religious life. And though the Western Empire fell, the Roman Catholic Church, with its popes in Rome, endured, carrying Roman identity through the Middle Ages and beyond. The myth of Rome. In the centuries after the fall, kings and emperors across Europe sought to claim Rome's legacy. Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Romans in 800 CE, in a ceremony designed to revive what had been lost. Later came the Holy Roman Empire, a political idea that lasted for 1,000 years, in name if not in soul. Even Mussolini, in the 20th century, called his state the Third Rome. For some, Rome was a dream to restore, for others a warning to remember. But always present. Ruins and reminders, travelers from the Renaissance to today have wandered through the ruins of the Roman world. They've run their hands over broken statues, climbed cracked steps, stared up at domes that defy age. The Colosseum, though hollow, still stands. The Pantheon, its dome untouched by time, still opens to the sky. In Pompeii, ash has preserved a moment of life, a Roman city paused in breath, the dust has settled, but it remembers, echoes in the quiet. And so, as we lie here, eyes heavy, breath steady, we remember not just dates or emperors, not just battles or names, but the feeling of a world built by hands, by hopes, by flawed but brilliant people. A farmer digging in rocky soil, miles from Rome, still proud to call himself Roman, a teacher reciting Cicero, a child lighting a clay lamp before sleep, a builder laying stone, not knowing it would stand for 2,000 years. The empire is gone, but the humans remain. Time is a circle. Perhaps, one day, our own cities will crumble, our language will change, our machines will rust, and someone, centuries from now, will walk through our ruins, wondering who we were, but just as we remember Rome, someone may remember us. Because history is not a straight road. It curves, it loops, it returns, like stars that rise again, like dreams that drift into dawn. Sleep now. Traveler, you've walked with emperors. You've crossed mountains with Hannibal. You've stood beneath the arch of Titus. You've seen the Republic rise and the Empire fall. Now, let it all fade. Let the marble fade to mist. Let the banners flutter into shadow. Let the voices of the Senate dissolve into quiet. You are safe. You are still. And history can wait. Sleep now, traveler. You have walked through Rome. We often remember Rome through its emperors, generals, and conquests. But the real Rome, the one that lived, breathed, and built the empire, was found in its ordinary people. The baker, rising before dawn to knead dough in a smoky oven. The fishmonger at the harbor, shouting prices over the noise of seagulls. The house servant, sweeping tiled floors, whispering prayers to household gods. They lived not for history, but for today. Their homes were small. Their meals were simple. Olives, bread, wine. Their joys were small. A good harvest, a cool breeze, a child's first words. On market days, the streets bustled with life. Traders from Africa, Asia, Gaul. The languages of the world met in the narrow alleys of the Subura, Rome's poorest district. Children chased dogs through fountains. Poets read verses to half-interested crowds. In the baths, gossip flowed freely. In temples, incense curled upward like soft breath. These were the true citizens of Rome, not statues, but souls. And though they are long gone, their fingerprints remain in the walls they built, the cups they made, the coins they lost beneath floorboards. In every ruin lies a whisper. I was here. I lived. Why do we return to Rome again and again? Because it reminds us not of perfection, but of possibility. Rome was grand, but flawed. Glorious, but violent. Wise, yet foolish, and so are we. It teaches us that even the mightiest powers are temporary, that civilization is a fragile thread held together by trust, order, and memory, that ideas, law, language, justice outlive armies and emperors. It reminds us that progress and collapse can live side by side, that the same people who build aqueducts can build arenas for blood, that culture can bloom in the shadow of cruelty. Rome is not a story of good or evil. It's a story of people, full of ambition, fear, love, pride, and dreams. It teaches us to build carefully, to remember humbly, and to walk slowly through ruins, for they speak if we listen. So, tonight, we close the pages of this chapter, not with an ending, but with a breath. The empire sleeps. And now, perhaps, so can you. There is something about ruins that calms the soul. They do not fight for attention. They do not shout history into your ears. They simply exist, patient, broken, silent, a fallen column, a worn inscription, a marble step, shaped not by tools, but by 1,000 years of passing feet. And yet, somehow, they are more alive than many buildings that stand tall today, because they remember. The stones. Remember. They remember the sandals of senators echoing on mosaic floors. They remember the laughter of children chasing pigeons through public squares. They remember the hiss of oil lamps, the splash of water in fountains, the soft voices of lovers speaking Latin under archways. Stone does not age the way we do. It watches, it waits, and beneath those stones, forgotten things sleep, lost names, broken cups, coins once clutched in trembling hands. These are not just artifacts. They are echoes, and if you listen closely, very closely, they almost sound like a heartbeat. The thread of time. You and I. We walk on modern streets, speak modern words, wear modern clothes, but the thread of time is thin, and Rome is never. Far, in every courthouse, in every word that ends in "tien," in every idea of a republic, of law, of roads and rights, Rome hums quietly beneath our daily lives like a low vibration in the floor of the world. History is not a museum. It's a mirror, and when we look closely, we don't just see togas and columns. We see ourselves, uncertain, proud, flawed, brilliant, human, sleep beside the empire. So now, as the world outside your window stills, as the lights dim, as your body sinks into rest, you are not alone. You lie beside the ghost of an empire, not in fear, but in comfort. The empire is gone, yes, but it left you stories. It left you silence. It left you the rhythm of rising and falling. The truth that nothing lasts, but everything leaves something behind. Let your breath slow. Let the roads fade behind mist. Let the sound of marching legions drift into distance. Let the marble palaces crumble gently back into dust. The eternal part, we all carry a little bit of Rome. Not in our pockets, but in our minds. In how we think. In how we organize, build, speak, argue, dream. Rome built walls and roads, but it also built memory, and memory survives even when stone does not. And you, tonight, are part of that. A quiet listener, a gentle witness, resting beneath the weight of centuries and smiling in your sleep. You do not need to remember the emperors, or the years, or the battles. All you need is this, that long ago, far away, a city rose, it grew, it changed the world, and now it rests, just like you. Sleep now, traveler of time, and if you dream tonight, may you dream beneath Roman stars.